Welcome students. In this video class, we would begin up Unit B or Section B of the poetry prescribed for you. In this class, we would take up for discussion Toru Dutt's poem, The Lotus. Section A consisted the English poets. In Section B, there is a cultural shift, and this shift actually looks at the writings written in India. Some of them, they were originally written in English, and some of them, they are the translated works. We all know that literature, it is related to cultural shift, it is related to various movements, and Indian English writing, it is a very prominent shift in the perspective of the English writings which we take up for discussion. India, because it was the colony of Britishers, so English, it became a medium of communication. When it was actually imposed by Macaulay in India, it became a medium of instruction and of education also, and writers, they started writing in English. So Indian English literature is a very prominent body of literature. The Lotus is a very prominent poem by Toru Dutt. Toru Dutt, she was born in a family of writers and poets, and she received a good education as well as an exposure to the Western world. But she remained rooted to her culture, and the lotus, it symbolizes her outlook or her reaction of what she is thinking about her own culture and about her own myths and about her own country. One thing that we should know before beginning up with the discussion of the poem is that the Renaissance in India is basically termed up as the Bengal Renaissance. And why it is termed up as the Bengal Renaissance? Because the movement, it has its early location, or it initiated in Bengal. Calcutta was the British capital from 1772 to 1911. And there were various movements which were political, which were social, which were in fact patriotic, and which were the Reformation movement that initiated in Bengal. And why we are discussing it? Because Toru Dutt, she belonged to Bengal. She belonged to a very progressive family. The Lotus, it is a sonnet. A sonnet, we all know, is a poem of 14 lines. So this is a sonnet by Toru Dutt, and it describes the conflict between flowers about the flower which should be chosen as the queen of flowers. So the god of love, Cupid, he asked Flora, and Flora is the goddess of flowers, to choose the queenliest flower among the flowers. And there's the affection that arises, there is a strife that arises among the flowers, and ultimately it is the lotus which is being chosen as the queenliest flower, as the queen of flowers. Now, lotus, we all know that it has a very significant place as a symbol in India. At first, it is a national symbol of India, and it also has a very prominent place as far as Hindu faith is concerned. So The poetess, she wants to specify the pride of Indian culture as well as the mythological significance or the cultural significance of India to the Western world. So let us read the text of the poem and discuss the poem. The poem begins, love came to Flora asking for a flower that would of flowers be undisputed queen. The lily and the rose long, long had been rivals for that high honor. So there's a personification in the first line of love as well as Flora. Flora, we all know, is the goddess of flowers, and love is for Cupid, the god of love. So the god of love, he comes to the goddess of flowers and he requests Flora for a flower, to give him a flower that should be regarded as the undisputed queen, as means the doubtless position of the queen, undisputed queen, should be given to that particular flower. The lily and the rose. Now, the lily and the rose means these two flowers, they appear as the rivals because of their beauty, because of their stateliness, because of their qualities. For long they had been rivals, they had been the claimants of this honorable position of being the undisputed queen among flowers. So they are the two contestants that actually have their claim, and these are the lily and the rose, these two flowers. Bards of power had sung their claims. The rose can never tower like the pale lily with her Juno mien, but is the lily lovelier? So there had been factions, there had been division among these two flowers who had been the claimant for this position of honor, and these two flowers, they were rose and lily. Bards of power are for the remarkable poets, for the important poets, for the famous poets. They have been singing the claims of both of these flowers. Means they were divided in their opinions. Some of the poets, they were writing about rose, and some of the poets, they were expressing the beauty of lily or the stateliness of lily. So this strife actually continues, and there is a question that arises that the rose cannot be as stately, it cannot reach the tower, it cannot reach the state of lily, which has its Juno mien. Juno is the ancient Roman goddess, and she is the wife of Jupiter. She is the Roman equivalent of Hera, queen of gods in Greek mythology. Mien is for the facial expression, the appearance. So the question arises whether lily, with its stateliness, be given this honor, or the rose. The question arises, is the rose is the lily lovelier? Because rose is a lovely flower. So Juno has its lily has its stateliness, and like Juno, and rose has its loveliness. So the poets or the judges, they are divided in their opinion whether rose should be given the honor or lily should be given the honor. Thus between flower factions rang the strife in Psyche's bar. Give me a flower delicious as the rose and stately as the lily in her pride. So there is this conflict which is there between love, Flora, and Psyche. Psyche is, in classical mythology, is the personification of the soul in the form of a beautiful girl. In Latin mythology, love is Cupid, and he loved the beautiful maiden Psyche. So, Psyche is the beloved of Cupid, love, god of love. So, here, this flower factions, between these flower factions, there is a strife, there is a conflict which is raised in the bar of Psyche, and love is basically demanding. He wants to have the best possible feature in the flower, which should be the most suitable suitable flower or the candidate for the position of the queen of flowers. So, give me a flower delicious as the rose and stately as the lily in her pride. What is basically demanded, what love basically demands is from Flora to give a flower as delicious as the rose and as stately as the lily, which has the quality of the rose and the stateliness of lily. And that flower should be the queen of flowers, which should be declared as the queen of flowers, which should be the claimant of this high honor. But of what color rose red love first chose, then prayed no lily white, or both provide. And Flora gave the lotus rose red dyed and lily white, the queenliest flower that blows. So again the conflict continues when Flora asks love that what should be the color of the flower which is to be chosen as the queen of flowers, whether it should be red like rose or it should be white like lily. And then what love demands is a mixture of both of these colors, rose red dyed and the whiteness of lily. That should be the color, and Flora, harmonizing this entire conflict, giving a solution, present the god of love with the flower lotus, which has the color of the red rose and the lily white, the mixture of rose and lily, and has the stateliness of lily. So it becomes the queen of flowers that blows. The Lotus by Toru Dutt has been interpreted in its deeper and symbolic meanings. The poem, it deals with the judgment of Psyche, love and flower, the conflict between them and the solution that comes out at the end of the poem. So it shows the myth poetic imagination. Love and Flora both are related to Greek and Roman myths, as well as Cupid in Latin mythology. Psyche is the beloved of Cupid in Western mythology. The poem perfectly embodies and combines the Greek and Roman mythology along with the Indian and Hindu myths. It mixes the eastern and western side of the identity of the poetess. The poet, she gives the position of the queen of flowers to the lotus, which has its significance in Hindu faith and which is also a national symbol of India. The overall theme has often been interpreted as proclaiming the pride of Indian culture and Hindu religion. The idea of the supremacy of her own country as well as her own myths has been portrayed in this poem. Through this flower, through this faction, she is trying to portray the supremacy of Indian tradition, and she explains that the Indian myths and Indian tradition, they should not be undermined while they are reading the Western myths and Western tradition. If we take up the form and the structure of the poem, the Lotus is a Petrarchan sonnet and it has 14 lines. The first 8 lines, they present a conflict, and this conflict is between love and Flora, who is asking for a flower which should be the perfect flower. So love is in search for a perfect flower which should be given the honor of the highest position, or which should be considered or regarded as the queen of flowers. So the first 8 lines of the poems, they present the tension generated by the debate between the rival factions who are claiming the honor or who are claiming the position of lily and rose as the queenliest of flower. The next 6 lines, they reduce this tension as the goddess of flower. She puts rose and lily aside and she gives a mixture of rose and lily, the lotus, the perfect combination of both, which has the deliciousness and redness of rose and stateliness and whiteness of lily, to be the claimant or to be in the position of the queen of flowers. The poem follows a rhyme scheme of ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD, DC. Personification has widely been used. Love, Flora, Psyche, they all have been personified, and even the flowers, rose and lily, who have been claiming their position, or the bards of power who have been claiming their positions, they have also been personified. Toru, she has been regarded as the initiator of the new kind of poetry written in English, as well as she is also considered as a very important poetess beginning the Indian English writing traditions. She was born in a family of writers and poets and received a good education as well as an exposure to the Western world. While she was young, she had traveled to Britain and France during her childhood. The amount of work that she has done is quite amazing because she died very young. She died at when she was only 21 years old. She was born in 1856 and died in 1877. Her novel Bianca appeared in 1878, and her French novel Le Journal, it appeared in 1879. Her collection of poems titled Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, it was published in the year 1882 posthumously. But then there's an amazing amalgamation of Western culture, Western tradition, as well as Indian tradition and Indian culture in her poetry. And it's quite amazing that in such a short life, she had produced such literary talent, and her work demonstrated various aspects of her talent. Toru had often been placed in the romantic traditions. Most of her publications, they were published posthumously, and she has often been acclaimed for the newness in her writing, for the rhythmical and the lyrical and the content of her writing. The sensuous aspects of her writing often reminds us of the Western writers, the nature poetry, or the poems proclaiming about nature. They also reminds us of various Western writers. Ancient ballads and legends of Hindustan are her expressions of her affiliation towards Indian myths, Indian traditions, which she tries to express it, the greatness of Indian legends to the Western world. The Renaissance, it had started in Bengal. She belonged to a progressive family, to an educated family, and she was an educated young woman. So she places a point of view, the Indian view, to the Western ideas, to the Western world, and in this sense, her works are very prominent in Indian English literature as well as English literature.